Coming up on today's show, Orit Krug is an award-winning, board-certified dance and movement therapist and licensed creative arts therapist who has helped transform the lives of more than 5,000 clients. A licensed therapist with her own practice, she has helped couples strengthen and expand their relationships by working through past trauma stored in the body. As Orit practices polyamory in her own life, she uses her experience and platform to ensure that partners can safely and lovingly expand beyond the normal boundaries in all of their relationships. Welcome to Loving Without Boundaries, where we hear inspiring stories, share actionable advice, and talk about the challenges and the joys of ethical non-monogamy and polyamory. I'm your host, Kitty Shambliss. Coming up after the break, my conversation with Orit Krug.
Are you bored with dick pics? Do random hookups and empty chats kill your vibe? Tired of being catfished or wasting time with messages from faceless profiles? Then you need to get Monogamish, a new dating app designed for singles and couples of all genders and sexualities looking for dates, mates, and everything in between. Access exclusive matchmaking events, workshops with dating and sexuality gurus, and exclusive offers so hot you'll just have to see for yourself. Download Monogamish for free from Google Play or the Apple App Store. Monogamish. Explore fluid relationships.
Welcome back to Loving Without Boundaries, where I am really thrilled to be here with Orit Krug. We've had a lovely conversation about a week and a half ago or so, and we're excited to have the podcast interview here to continue to get to know each other better. So Orit, welcome to our show. I'm glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So I've already shared your bio with our listeners, but I always love to give you an opportunity to introduce yourself in your own words.
Sure. So my name is Orit, and I am a board-certified dance movement therapist. I help people and couples heal trauma from their bodies through a very specific and science-backed approach through movement. It's really helpful for people who have been in therapy for a really long time and they feel like they've made some progress, but still feels like it's not, like they don't really feel the way that they want to feel in their lives and their relationships. And so I work with individuals and couples to heal that trauma from their body so they can have healthier, more satisfying relationships. And I work with both monogamous and ethically monogamous individuals and couples.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. And I really want to just applaud you for the work that you're doing just to come from that trauma-informed lens. And I haven't read the book yet, but I know there's that book about talking about how we do trap trauma in our body. What's the name of the book?
You're probably referring to The Body Keeps the Score?
Yes, The Body Keeps the Score. I have it in my Kindle. I have not read it yet, but I'm really excited to read that book. So it's been something that's been on my mind that I want to learn more about. So I appreciate you being here just to tell us a little bit more about your journey. And I'm just delighted that all of us have people like yourselves to go to if maybe they just want to keep going a little bit further from either therapy or coaching, and they're looking for that je ne sais quoi to take them to the next level. For those people that maybe are really high achieving and just want to live their absolute best lives and just don't want anything to get in the way. So I definitely would love to hear more about that. But if it's okay, I'd love to learn a little bit more about you and your background. Does that sound good?
Absolutely. Let's do it.
Awesome. Cool. So I'd love to ask what I call the light bulb question, which is there a particular moment or maybe a series of moments where you realize that maybe you just weren't exactly like the other people around you? Like maybe you were somehow going to be coloring outside lines of heteronormative monogamy, or there was just something a little bit different about your path that may look a little bit different than maybe what the majority of people might be doing. Was there a moment like that for you?
I think I've felt that way in a lot of aspects of my life, throughout my life. I mean, my name is Orit. I think that started probably when I was born. I'm a dance movement therapist, which is not a super popular profession, which even though somatic therapy is getting more popular. And yeah, I think I've always kind of felt different in a sense, but I didn't really know or understand it as related to E&M. When my husband and I met 10 years ago, we were talking about the Christopher Ryan book, Sex at Dawn, and we were just casually talking about it, and we just seemed to agree that this was something that we were open to down the line if it was something that we felt like would benefit us or our relationship. But at that time, that conversation alone was very triggering for me because I had experienced a lot of my own trauma growing up. And so even the discussion about us opening up our relationship someday in the distant future was like, it triggered thoughts of, oh my God, is he cheating right now? Does he not think I'm enough? Does he want to be with other people? And so I was basically like, I can't even talk about this with you. I can't even consider this. And, you know, he was like, well, we weren't talking about now. And I had just said that, yeah, but I can hardly, at that point, it was hard for me to even be in a monogamous relationship due to all this unresolved trauma. And then fast forward about 8 years later, I had done a lot of healing of my past trauma. I had grown a lot, and I just kept, my husband and I go to a lot of music events and festivals, and we are, you know, we're dancing and getting close with just big groups of people. And I just kept picturing certain things like group sex, or that we would do things outside of the line sexually and romantically, and they didn't go away. So I finally said to him, I think I'm ready now.
Wow. And how many years was that from the beginning of the conversation to that moment?
That was 8 years.
8 years. That's a lot of insights and awareness and patience, right? And just all like in really leaning into, am I ready? Let's talk about this. So I really applaud the journey that you and your husband went on to not go too fast. I think that's really important too.
Yeah, that's an interesting reflection too, because since we have opened up, I feel like we've moved really fast. But when you reflect that back to me in that way, I'm like, oh yeah, it's actually been a long time in the making.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's beautiful. And I think that can be, I've seen this a lot, both in my work with clients and even in my own life, that it can be very off-putting or kind of affect our nervous system, or maybe, like you said, trigger some past trauma when people dive in just too fast, too soon, or, you know, maybe for one or both people, that can be very upsetting. Yeah. So I applaud you both for waiting that amount of time until you were ready. So what would you say has been some of the biggest challenges that you've experienced as you two have either been on that journey about to open up or since you've opened up?
Yeah. So my absolute biggest challenge since opening up was that I was exposed to unhealed trauma of my own that I thought was healed. So I call myself a trauma and relationship expert. I have a pretty good following, pretty big following online. And I'm like, oh, I'm healed. And this is, here are relationship tips. And when I say I'm healed, I mean, I have healed my past trauma, and I'm able to be in this beautifully loving, deep, secure relationship with my husband, which was all true. But then we opened up our relationship. And when I started seeing the first person separately, I just experienced all of this anxiety in terms of this person liking me, this person texting me back. It was all these little things that I'm like, wait, I thought I was secure. I thought, I'm secure with my husband. I don't experience jealousy anymore. I don't really experience insecurity with my husband, Aaron, at all. And now all of a sudden I have this intense, anxious attachment with this new person. And it completely threw me off guard. And I realized that there was still past trauma unhealed. Mm-hmm. And it was being revealed to me through this first poly relationship.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Yeah. And I want to just say thank you for being so vulnerable here with all of us and our listeners. There's so much in your story that I'm sure a lot of us can relate to, myself included. So I think it just is worthy of pausing and just stopping and, applauding your courage and you just being really vulnerable so that people can learn from that, learn that it's okay. There's a way that I think opening up a relationship, it can shine a spotlight on all the different areas that we all need to possibly grow and to do it in a healthy way. So thank you for sharing that. How do you think that had an impact on maybe on your husband or on the person that he was seeing? Was there like a rippling effect, or was it more just you and your husband kind of talking that through, or how did that experience go?
That was at the very beginning of us opening our relationship. And so my husband wasn't really seeing anyone more than very, very casually at the time. So I think all the action was happening with me and this person. I wouldn't call him a partner at the time. And he was so supportive throughout, but it was a lot of me trusting that I could open up and tell him, because I think I was in denial, first of all, about my feelings for this person. And when we started exploring separately, we saw it as primarily a sexual exploration. Of course, we've learned since then that, at this point we identify as poly, but we have, of course, learned since then that you can't control who you have feelings for, even if you intend on just exploring physically. And so it took me a while to admit really fully to him how much I was having feelings for this person. And when I finally did, he was just so supportive. My husband is an avid Reddit reader. And so we were so new to this. I didn't even really know the term. I didn't know the term NRE yet. And so he said, I think you're experiencing NRE. And he was telling me all about how your brain chemistry changes when you're in a new relationship. And this is why I'm feeling like I want more, but I don't have enough. And he was just so supportive, and he didn't feel threatened by it at all, which was really beautiful because he trusted me to not make any rash decisions, I guess.
That's beautiful. And it really illustrates that you did have that really secure, safe haven or that bond before you opened up, so that you were better equipped to kind of handle those ebbs and flows that happens. It's really inspiring to hear. How about what were some ways that maybe you were moving through that, besides, of course, talking to your husband when you were feeling some of that insecure, that anxiety, the attachment style? Like, what were some things that you did to help you move through that in maybe a gentle or a growth way?
I'll say that it took me a while because I was so caught off guard. I didn't expect those kinds of feelings and anxiety to come up. So I think it took me a while just to, again, come to truth about what was happening, because at the same time, there was all this guilt happening about, oh my God, I have feelings for someone else. I even had a dream one time that I was making out with this guy, and I guess in the distance, my entire house crumbled down with my husband and my kid in it. And I'm like, oh my God, I went to rush over there, and I was like, are you okay? And they just kind of looked at me. I mean, the house crumbled to the ground, but they're like, yeah, we're good. And so it really reflected to me all this processing that was happening subconsciously as well about, I feel so guilty. I'm going to sabotage everything. I'm going to ruin my family. And they're like, no, we're okay. This is okay. And so I think a lot of space and time. I had to take space from this person because they didn't understand what was going on for me. I went back to therapy for the first time in a while because I needed that. Yeah, I needed that extra support, and really just listening to my body. It got in the way of me having restful sleep for a little bit. And so I would be so tired during the day and so drained, and there's just so much to process that I would literally really listen to my body and allow myself to rest. Or, I do a what I do with my clients and also myself is just kind of a moving meditation where I tune in, I feel what sensations are there. And instead of trying to push away those sensations or numb them or disconnect from them and pretend they're not there, I listen and see those sensations in my mind's eye, and then I allow my body to respond to them and move through that. And that kind of gives me the experience that I can be, I can choose to move through these sensations and respond to them however my body is asking me to. And that helps me process the emotions as well.
Mm-hmm. That's really beautiful. To me, what I'm hearing from that is just trusting yourself, trusting your intuition, and also the work that you've chosen to do, and then kind of doing your own work, right? Like practicing what you preach. I often say we're always in the trenches of our work. So you being able to notice what your body's needing, whether it's rest, whether it's a walking meditation, is really inspiring to hear and to see that without shame, you were like, hey, I'm having this experience and I want to move through it. What's the best thing that I can do right now to do that? So,
yeah,
awesome. Where would you say you are now on your journey?
Right now, I still consider myself very, very new. I mean, it's only been 2 years and still learning and healing a lot. I'm currently dating and exploring after and really taking things slow after a recent poly relationship breakup where I'm still learning a lot from that experience. And at the same time, my husband is, newly has a partner, and I'm processing that. There's just so much going on where I'm really listening to the guidance and the advice that I would give to every one of my clients, where just take more time, take more space, really let yourself feel the feelings. I think we know that grief comes in waves, and there's a lot of things that I'm grieving right now. I'm grieving that, that recent relationship that ended in heartbreak. I'm grieving my monogamous relationship with my husband. I feel really good at this time because I am allowing myself to feel those feelings. And while they come back in waves, I think I'm just really allowing myself to be in the sauce of it all while still not closing my heart and still dating and seeing where things go with, several different people.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. That sounds really beautiful. And again, with your eyes wide open and doing your own work along the way. And it sounds like you've got a really supportive partner there, which is great. I think sometimes, again, people might go too fast, or they may be opening up before making sure that their kind of anchor relationship is really solid and secure. So I think that's beautiful that you were able to create that over time. So I'd love to hear, how did your journey eventually take you to becoming a dance and a movement therapist? Like where was that along that journey?
Yeah. So as I mentioned before, I experienced a lot of trauma growing up, and I also started dancing at a local studio when I was 4 years old. And I may not have realized it at the time, but going to the studio every day of the week was a way for me to have a safe space to express myself and to release certain emotion through dance. And by the time I was a senior in high school, my mom discovered dance therapy in the paper. And she's like, hey, do you know this is a thing? And I said, no, but this sounds perfect, because I've always wanted to help people. And I've always been the person that people come to for relationship advice. I can remember as early as middle school, people messaging me on AOL Instant Messenger. Anyone remembers those times? Mm-hmm. And asking me for advice, relationship advice. And I'd be like, yeah, like I love this stuff. And so I've carried that with me through going through my dance therapy training, getting a master's, all my hours after, and landing here where I specialize in helping people have the best relationships possible, even when there is trauma in their history, because my trauma until I was able to really process and heal it from my body. I sabotaged every relationship, or I attracted relationships that weren't healthy for me. And there is a sense where I'm afraid that I'm possibly doing that again. And now my poly life, my second chance at dating around. But I know how much unresolved trauma can really get in the way of us having something really, really beautiful and healthy and safe and fulfilling. And so going through my own experience after graduating from my master's program in dance therapy, when I met my husband, he was the first healthy person I really had ever dated. He was just so calm, cool, collected, so present. And I just kept waiting for him to become a monster like I was used to. And I just tested him and pushed him away. And I was just like, I have to do dance therapy myself as a client to not mess up this relationship and end up alone forever. And so I did that, and it really helped with that missing puzzle piece that I had, because I had already been in years of talk therapy myself, and I knew all the things that I needed to do to change or to let in his love and to be more available for him. But when it came to conflict or just anxiety, I just shut down, and my body didn't follow through on the behaviors that I knew that I needed to do to be in this healthy relationship. Mm-hmm. So that's where I'm at now in terms of, this is my specialty as a dance therapist, is helping people and couples heal that trauma that gets in the way of really having that deep, satisfying love.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have a few questions that are coming from that. One is, for our listeners, is there signs that you can point to that might indicate that there is unresolved trauma?
Yeah, I think the biggest sign is if there's a difference between having healthy, common responses to relationship issues, right? Like, we can get angry, we can get sad, we can feel upset, and we can respond to those emotions and navigate them by ourselves and also with our partners. But when the reactions that you're having are very intense and they're reflecting a fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response, which I can break down a little further if you'd like, that's how you know that there's trauma being activated and the nervous system is responding in a survival with a survival defense mode.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Yeah, feel free to walk that out a little bit more for our listeners.
Sure. So a fight response would look like, so the fight and flight responses are sympathetic nervous system responses, where the nervous system goes into an active state of responding. So if you were to go on a hike and face a predator, a bear, let's say, your nervous system could automatically react in trying to fight the bear or trying to run away. And we don't choose consciously the way that we react. This happens automatically, because this is what's saved our lives and helped us survive and evolve as humans and animals for a really long time. So while that is a healthy and needed survival technique for that situation out in the wild, when there's past trauma, we repeat that kind of pattern in relationships too, when it's not necessary, unless you're in a very toxic or abusive relationship and you actually need to save your life. Responding in these more ways of survival that represents a trauma response. So if you were to fight, you might yell uncontrollably, you might curse, say things you later regret. You might have an urge or even get physically aggressive, not necessarily towards your partner, but maybe you throw something across the room. If you are reacting in a flight response, perhaps you run away into another room, or you leave the house and you drive away. or you threaten to break up every time you have a fight, or you actually do leave the relationship. You're running away, you're escaping the situation. A freeze response, that was useful for us. If you're on a hike, you're facing a bear, looks like they're going to eat you. When we're in a freeze response, our muscles tense up so much that we become unappetizing to eat. And then it increases our chances of survival. The freeze response is a parasympathetic response. That is a more ancient response. So if your nervous system perceives that actually this thing is really, really dangerous, I actually have to freeze in order to save my life. And if you're doing that in a relationship, right? Like if you freeze up in the middle of a discussion or argument, you might start looking like a deer in the headlights. You become unresponsive. If you've ever been in an argument with someone and with your partner and they're like, it looks like they're not there anymore. And you're like, hey, hello, can you answer? They're in the freeze response and their nervous system is finding it really, really, really scary to be in this conflict with you. The fawn response is what people know as the people-pleasing response. It's about abandoning all of your needs and your own, everything, your boundaries, abandoning that in order to please someone else. And so that one's pretty self-explanatory as well. Mm-hmm. And so if these are, I think every once in a while, we all have these reactions, right? If we're more stressed, then our window of tolerance is going to be smaller. The window of tolerance is that calm, cool, regulated space in our nervous system where we're relaxed, we're calm, we can respond, in a more chill way, I guess I would say. And when we're stressed, that window gets smaller. So things are more likely to push us out of that window and react. And so my point is, it's okay to react like this every once in a while. That doesn't necessarily mean that, you have all this unresolved trauma. But when you find that you're consistently reacting in any one or more of these ways to in your relationships, then that's a very, very strong sign that there's past trauma.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. And I think you did a really great job of just explaining the different responses and why that can happen. What I think is tricky, and you and I even spoke about this offline, is differentiating when it's your work to do, like you have some unhealed or unresolved trauma from the past, or when you might be in a relationship, like maybe it's not quite so obvious that it's toxic and abusive. Like we all understand if we're feeling like we're physically in danger, of like domestic violence, but then there's kind of the more trickier to understand when there's maybe some emotional abuse going on. Do you have any ways to touch on that to help people understand, like, here's what's my work to do, or here's when maybe I am kind of in like an emotional, my nervous system is, like you said, is having a normal human response. And I've been learning a little bit more about being trauma bonded. Like if maybe like the couple like just gets in this vicious cycle where they can't quite get out of it. Anything you'd care to just highlight there for our listeners?
Yeah, I think we can get really, I think unless there's a relationship where it's clearly like there's one side that's being extremely abusive or toxic, I would say that it's helpful not to try to figure out who's starting who or who's triggering who, because in my work with couples, I see that while it may be, it may seem more obvious from the outside that one partner is perhaps, less emotionally available or blaming more or whatever it is, what we come to see is that how much these triggers are co-created in between all partners of a relationship. And again, that's not to say that it's one person's fault over the other or that it's both people's fault, but it's so hard to pick out, unless again, it's very, very obvious. It's so hard to pick out who needs to do this work or who's starting this, because it's likely that whatever your trauma triggers are co-creating your partner's trauma triggers and vice versa. So one couple that I worked with, one of the issues with that the female partner was complaining about was that when she would ask her partner to do little tasks around the house, take out the trash, help out, clean up, he would just you'd kind of blankly stare, or he would say, okay, yeah, I'll do it another time, or you would just kind of be avoidant of that. And what we discovered when we explored this together in session through movement was that the way that she was asking for things was very intense. The way that her body and her movements were presenting were very intense. And I think she used the words when we were processing afterwards, she said, I'm so used to needing to set fires in order to get attention, because in her, as a child, she needed to do that. She needs to, quote unquote, set fires in order to get attention. And so in her perception before doing this work together, she thought, I'm asking nicely. I'm trying to be kind about it, whatever she saw on the outside. But when we saw that in movement, it was like her movements were very chaotic. And it was like it's almost like she was trying to call someone to save her life. And so I could see his body responding, getting smaller, getting more immobile, getting more frozen in response to her. And again, it's not to say that this is her fault, that he wasn't doing the house task that she was asking, but in her perception, it was all him. And what we discovered non-verbally, which shows us so much more a lot of the times than just seeing just listening to the words, is that he was having his own trauma triggered by the way she was presenting that.
Mm-hmm. That's fascinating. And what a beautiful example, too, how it can be human nature to want to kind of point the finger like this is all what you're doing. But I think that was a beautiful example of how most of us have some sort of trauma from where we grew up, or just whether it was our caregivers or religion or whatever it is. And so we might be kind of poking the bear in each other, but not having the clarity to understand how to do that, like how to see it from the outside. Like one thing I say is, if you're inside the jar, you can't read the label on the outside of the jar. So by having you as a third party to say, here's what I'm noticing, what if we try this? And to have you kind of walk through that gently without blaming or shaming either person, just, hey, we're human beings and we're doing our best to live our best lives here. So yeah. I think that's such beautiful work that you're doing.
Thank you. Yeah. And not only is it, I don't see it that way. It's also now, once I see it, how do we change it? And so when we were able to intentionally change the way that she non-verbally approached him, not just through this issue, but through other issues, he was there. He's like, hey, I'm here. What can I do? How can I help you? It was just it looked completely different. They looked like a completely different couple by the end of our work together, because it was less of this, like, you're doing this or you're not doing this. And it was more like, wow, I really can understand you now. And I understand how we can communicate to be on the same team. And, oh, you weren't just out to get me this whole time. You weren't just not caring about my needs. You just were struggling with your own stuff that was coming up that kind of made you unable to respond.
That's really beautiful. So with an example of that couple, so do you have like a normal time frame that you're working with people typically?
Yeah, about 3 to 5 months.
3 to 5 months.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Because I assume it takes that amount of time just to kind of move through it and get to the other side and make those new habits, or like first tease out what's really going on and then create new habits and rituals and make that consistent to build some momentum. Is that kind of why it takes that amount of time, would you say?
Yeah, I think also because what I do is so different and it asks people to connect to their bodies in a different way. So just the first few sessions, I help each individual in a couple, or each individual, if I'm working with just one person, connect with their bodies in this new way and start to feel safe in their bodies and build rapport with their own bodies as well as me as a therapist. And then, it takes some time to change those patterns, for people who are repeating patterns from 20 years or from trauma that happened 20 years ago. It's going to take a little bit of time and work. And then, but once we really start to rewire the nervous system and shift those movement behaviors, it's like a lot of times my clients will say, once you learn this, you can't unlearn it. Once you learn to ride a bike, you can get on that bike again for the first time in another 10 years, and you pretty much know how to ride that bike because your body has remembered it. Just like the body, right? We talked about the body keeps a score. The body remembers trauma. The body also will remember new healthy patterns. So it can take, 3 to 5 months, but then once these couples are in these individuals are in these new habits, these new patterns that are ingrained in their bodies, it becomes pretty natural to follow through on.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. One thing I'm curious about, sometimes people who have anxiety may have trouble sleeping. Do you find that some of this work helps people to get more restful sleep once they've gone through this process?
Yeah, the trouble with sleeping can really be about your nervous system not being able to get into that quote unquote rest and digest state. That's the parasympathetic state that I was referring to before. So if your nervous system is always ready to fight, ready to flight, ready to go and protect yourself, then it's hard to actually get your body to relax. And that's just something that I help my clients with, right? Working with the nervous system is this, Stephen Porges, who coined the polyvagal theory, he calls it immobilization without fear. And so that is being in the parasympathetic state, or we can even say the freeze state, but in a healthy way. So my body and my nervous system are able to rest, are able to be still. I'm able to cuddle with my partner without thinking about all the things that I have to do in the next few hours. I'm able to really be present in that, all these things that we can do. And in this rest and digest state is about rewiring the nervous system as well.
Mm. Awesome. That sounds incredible. Any particular thing that you would love to highlight? Like maybe what's maybe the most rewarding aspect of the work that you're doing with people?
I think I just have this deep mission to spread love, which I think sounds cheesy, but I see that when I just work with individuals and they start to live from a more loving place with themselves, more compassionate place from their own bodies, instead of this defensive, fearful place of like, who's out to get me and when, they start to present in their relationships with more love. And that inevitably shifts, a lot of relationships. And I think the more that we can come and live from a place of loving other people and trusting other people instead of immediately being judgmental or on defense, that spreads. And this is why I feel so deeply about working with people in open relationships, specifically polyamorous people, because that's like the essence of open, free love, right? I think we live in a culture where it's like, as a female, I can't tell my best friend who's male and married and monogamous that I love him, because that might be threatening to him or his wife. But that's something that is like, if we can see that from not a threatening place, not a fearful place, that it's just like, no, I'm just expressing my love for this person. And that's just kind of one little example, but spreading love, I think, is the answer to your question.
Mm-hmm. That's awesome. Well, anything else that you would love to share? Like, do you have any upcoming workshops, and we'll get to people connecting with you in a minute, but any kind of like questions I didn't ask or anything that you would like to share with our listeners before we start to wrap up?
Yeah, I think I would go back to a bit of my story from earlier, that if you're starting to explore E&M or polyamory and you're experiencing this rushing back of intense emotions or attachment wounds or unhealed trauma, like if you're having a particularly difficult time, to know that I think it's inevitable. I think this journey is so special because it gives us this pathway to see ourselves and heal more deeply than I believe we could through any other path. This is such a unique path where you're inevitably going to see the parts of you that are unhealed or the areas of growth through multiple relationships and through different kinds of relationships. And if that is happening for you, to see that as an opportunity to heal trauma, to heal further, to evolve more. And it's okay to take breaks sometimes from healing. I think we're in a culture where people are like, I have to heal now and I have to do it and I can't do anything else until I heal. But generally just see that as a call from your body that there's still something unresolved. And I know that's my why. This is my main why when things get really hard and I'm being really challenged with insecurity or heartbreak. It's like, oh, but I'm going to grow from this. When I get to the other side of this, I'm going to feel more free and more me than I have ever before. And I've done a lot of healing. So that's been, even more exciting. So my message really is to see it as an opportunity and do what is needed to heal that, and you won't regret it.
That is beautiful. I think it's a great message and probably one that a lot of people really need to hear. So just to repeat that, do what is needed to heal it. I think that's awesome. Okay, so with that, why don't I take you into the lightning round, and then we'll start to wrap up. So these are some fun kind of quick questions. You can maybe either underscore something you've already shared or add something new. But what would you say would be a tidbit of advice for people who are doing their best to live their most authentic lives? That whether it's something that you did along your own journey or just any wisdom that you can pass if somebody is looking to step into whether it's the LGBT community or identifying as polyamorous, any advice that you would love to give?
I would say if you're stepping into new territory, go back to grounding in your why, so that when things get difficult or when you feel lost, you have this kind of home base, like, oh, this is really hard, but I'm doing this because I want to grow. And this is certainly going to make me grow.
It's really awesome. Okay. And is there a book or a resource or a movie that really helped you on your own journey? We mentioned earlier the book Body Keeps the Score, which is one I'm definitely planning to read. But anything else that you would like to recommend?
Polysecure was really helpful for me in the last year. Even as someone who knows deeply about attachment theory, learning about attachment theory in the realm of polyamory is extremely helpful. So I would definitely recommend that if you're going to be in multiple relationships or if you're going to date outside of your primary partner.
Love it. Yeah. And that's a fantastic book that also just came out with a workbook as well. So that's amazing. And then lastly, for fun, is there a particular song or music that really moves you or inspires you?
I really enjoy melodic dubstep. I don't know if everyone would really know what that is, but it's like kind of like poppy, pretty vibes with heavy, dark drops. And I feel like it just speaks to the parts of me that are more lighter and feminine and fluid and, quote unquote pretty. And then the dark parts are like my aggressive, darker, sides. And so when I dance to that, I just feel like it's speaking to my entire body and soul.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. I'm looking forward to checking that out. Well, thank you so much again for your time here, Orit. This was super interesting. I think our listeners are going to really enjoy what you shared here. And where can people find you and your work?
You can find my work at oritkrug.com. That's my name.com. And I do have a polyamory couples retreat coming up in Costa Rica in April of 2024. So if you head over to my website and look under my retreats, you'll find that. It's a very intimate experience with just 7 spots for couples where we're going to do a lot of the work that I was mentioning here, working through trauma, through the body, individually, and also within your relationships.
Mm-hmm. I'm so excited.
Beautiful location.
It is. Yeah, I've been to Costa Rica once. It is so amazing there. Well, thank you again for your time, your wisdom, for the beautiful work that you're doing. I'm just really excited to have you in our sphere and on our interviewee list now. So really appreciate you reaching out, and know that I'm rooting for your success. And I hope your retreat is awesome. And who knows what other collaborations that you and I will come up with as we move forward. So I'm excited about all that could be to come.
Thank you. And thanks for holding this space for people to share their voice and for helping other people as well. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for tuning in to today's show. If you like what you heard, are struggling with some aspect of your relationships, and you're interested in seeing if you're a fit to work with me as your relationship coach, here's what I invite you to do next. Head over to lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply. That's lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply, and book a call to speak with me. I'll get on the phone with you for about 45 minutes, and we'll get you crystal clear on 3 things. Number 1, exactly what's not working well in your relationships right now. Number 2, ideally where you'd like to be and what might be getting in the way. And number 3, the exact strategy to get you there, helping to close that gap. Remember, creating healthy, open relationships does not typically happen by itself. Many often need expert guidance to make it happen. We've helped clients all over the world to feel safe, happy, and secure in open relationships, while not losing their mind or their cherished partners. To see if we can help you do the same, head over to lovingwithoutboundaries.com/apply. I'm Kitty Chambliss, and let's talk soon.